opinion of what's going on, and that's starting to feel a little bit disrupted, because even though it's a better opinion, it's not a familiar opinion. And so you will, from time to time, the drawing of how you get to your goal is definitely not a straight line. It's more like this. If you're doing your work, it's more like this, where you get going and you feel really, and then you have to do a correction because you're feeling way too unfamiliar here. So you'll go back, and the way most people move towards their goal is like this. This is without any practice. This is just like with beer and chips. You know, beer and chips and television and job, right? And trying to get to their goal. The idea of being involved in their goal is like completely out of the question. Yogi Bhajan was a soccer player, so he always liked to use the metaphor of the soccer game. In that top picture, you're not a player, you're the ball. And your life is going wherever the ball is being kicked, kicked by circumstance. Here, you actually become a player. And then it's a matter of how good a player can you become? You know, how much work are you willing to do on yourself so that you can become more and more and more accurate in moving towards the arc of your goal or your plan or your intention, whatever that is. So in the top picture, it's true that the road to hell is paved with good intentions, because that's hell. But in the bottom picture, it is true that the road to success is paved with the bricks of failure, because every time you experience a failure, you go, okay, well, we'll keep at it. Okay, well, we'll keep at it. Okay, well, we'll keep at it. And that you eventually arrive at your goal, which you also do in this. It just takes a lot more time, a lot more incarnations, and a lot more pain. So you end up finding, through your meditations, through your yoga, you end up finding these breakthroughs. And of course, on the other side of these breakthroughs, there is additional framework. Right? These layers, it's in spiritual practice, they use metaphors a lot. And one of the metaphors is that peeling the layers of an onion. Right? That you keep going down through, and you keep going down through, and you keep going down through. And if you've ever noticed it, have you ever had an onion around long enough for it to sprout? Right? The sprout doesn't come out of the outside layer, does it? The sprout comes out of the very inside layer, the deepest layer, because that layer is actually the seed. Right? So you have to go through all of these layers. And of course, as I said before, this is drawn in the inverse because you're actually moving inward. One of the things that is very important for us to use in order to achieve that is this right here, theta. Known as dream time, known as deep hypnosis, known as deep meditation, known by many names. But basically what it is the brain framing. You talk about framework. It is the brain framing at such a wide expanse that the amount of information that it takes in each frame is vast. It's so vast that words don't work. You know, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, symbology that takes place in the theta state of the brain is so vast, it's like that symbology is worth 100,000 words. So you can't articulate it very well, but it has deep meaning. Now, there's two ways of going into this state. One is that you go into it when you're going into deep sleep and when you're coming out of deep sleep. The only difference between that and the one that I am suggesting is that in this one you are unconscious, and in the one I'm suggesting you are conscious. But every day we require, for good mental, emotional and physical health, we require approximately 4 hours of deep delta, which is when everything is pretty much shut down except the brain is framing in these vast swaths of information that only are being used to rejuvenate the cells of your body. Really deep rejuvenative sleep. About 4 hours of that and 4 hours of theta. Now Yogi Bhajan used to say that he never dreamed. And that was because he spent so much time each day in deep meditation that his way of getting into sleep was like falling off a cliff. And I know it because I've been around him when he fell off that cliff, and you do not wake him up. Once he's fallen asleep, he's out. And so rather than this gentle passageway through dream time into delta and then going through delta, he and ultimately I became that too, fall into deep sleep, sit in deep sleep for that 4 hours, and then come out of it. You can lay in bed longer, but that deep delta is what your body needs for rejuvenation. But then you have to, if you do that if you only are in bed for like 5 or 6 hours each night, you have to be in deep meditation because your system requires that theta. It requires that dream time. Because it is in the dream time that all of this formulation takes place, where you formulate symbolic ways of getting through the cracks in your story. The cracks that tell you this is how it's always been, this is how it's always going to be. And every one of us has that kind of framework going on. And the purpose of Kundalini Yoga is to alter that framework. There's a thing going on in Antarctica right now. You know about the ships that are stuck in the ice? First there was an Australian ship stuck in the ice, then a Chinese icebreaker said, we'll save you. The Chinese icebreaker came in and then it got stuck in the ice. And now they're calling on the biggest icebreaker that the United States has to go down there, and if it gets stuck in the ice, then Russia's going to have to send down one of its nuclear icebreakers, which is like massively larger, and it's going to have to try to break through. Well, that's a little bit like trying to break through your story. You know, you get one way of breaking through your story, and if you attach to it, it's going to get stuck in a deeper story. So you will not get all the way through. So that is why it is said non-attachment is so important. You cannot even become attached to your successes. Because your successes will ultimately, as we said earlier, become passé. I mean, a perfect example is what I use, both for a phone and for an iPod. BlackBerry, right? Began the whole world of smartphones. Became fixated on its success, and all of a sudden, all of the other companies passed it by. And it was not, I mean, the company still has $3 billion in cash, and last year they lost $4 billion. So, I mean, these kinds of numbers make you think, well, that's stupid. That's just like stupid. But think of it not as a story about business. Think of it as a metaphor for life. Getting attached to a success will ultimately put you in a mess. Because the success of today is just the success of today, which is tomorrow, a day past, next week, a week past, next year, a year past. What you have to be is flexible. And there's this fluid in the body, synovial fluid, a magic fluid. Not only does it lubricate all of your joints, including every joint in the spine. So when you're stiff, this has a contributing factor to that stiffness. But gentle movement, constant gentle movement, is much more conducive to the flow and circulation and production of synovial fluid than fast, reactionary kinds of movements. And they have found that the movements that mimic the heartbeat, which are about 1 movement per second, are the most conducive to the production of synovial fluid. Not only is synovial fluid, they say it's like ice on glass. If you have healthy, abundant synovial fluid, your joints are moving like ice on glass. When you hear those, when you move something, it means that there are these patches that are not layered with the synovial fluid, and when you pass through them, it clicks because it catches, right? Not only is it a lubricant, but it's a restorative. That there are actual nutrients and components within synovial fluid that start to rebuild cartilage. And cartilage is a very difficult thing to rebuild because it doesn't have its own blood supply. It is nourished by the blood that surrounds it in the other tissue, but there are not blood vessels that actually pass through it. So when we're doing these exercises, and we do them in many different ways, we do the Sufi grind as a swivel, we do the Sufi grind as a swizzle, we do the Sufi grind with stiff arms which get up into the upper regions, we do the Sufi grind with loose elbows which get us throughout the middle part of the back. We want to get ourselves into all of these parts of the body because physical flexibility is a little bit synonymous with non-attachment, right? Because flexibility is different than those creaks and cracks that you feel when your joints are moving. Those are moments when there's a bit of an attachment, right? When the dry surface and the dry surface attach on each other. So all of our exercises are creating a flexibility or a non-attachment in the physical form, which then produces a non-attachment or a flexibility in the emotional and the psychological form. Right? Mm-hmm. Has this made sense? Yes. Mm-hmm. And when you surround yourself with a flexibility, a physical flexibility, an emotional flexibility, an emotional flexibility is when someone does something to upset you. You have a bit of a pattern. When you're emotionally flexible, you have a bit of a pattern that kicks in and says, okay, what outcome do we want here? Do we want to throw ourselves into this situation and get ourselves worked up to prove that this person has been incorrect? Or do we want to frame a circumstance in which this person will ultimately determine that they were incorrect and apologize? But you've remained flexible, compassionate, conducive, and in full form. And the closer a relationship is, the more that's going to kick in over and over and over. Just ask my wife. You know? Because one thing Yogi Bhajan once said to my wife and I just before we got married, he said, "Are you ready for the glue?" And I said, "The glue?" He said, "Yes. Marriage is like gluing a massive mirror to the tip of your nose. No matter where you look, there you are." And that I can verify. 38 years, that mirror has been glued to the tip of my nose. And you learn to work with that reflection after a while. Because there's no way that you can go that it's not there. So the key here is that as you are responding